I mean, the place to start is an addiction anthropology. It's assuming the nature of addiction. And if you get that right or you get that wrong, your policies will either be helpful when executed well or a complete and utter disaster. And so the addiction anthropology of the radical side of this, the radical activist says that it's not an addiction crisis at all. The anthropology is it's simply a problem of an unsafe supply, and we can facilitate addiction indefinitely, which is why ever increasing drug consumption sites in every street corner is a solution, along with drug unsafe supply being handed out by the government at taxpayer expense. Because addiction isn't really the problem in their mind. They frame it completely inauthentically and cynically as nothing but a toxic drug supply problem. I do not care whether someone is addicted to an opioid or pornography. It does not matter to me whether their crisis is something that's generated from homelessness and a mental health issue, or if it is somebody working a 9 to 5 that got a prescribed opioid because of a blue-collar job worksite injury. I want to be able to meet them where they're at and get them health care. Ostensibly, and this is a bold statement in Canada, ostensibly, healthcare should be about healing people and getting them healthy. That is unfortunately, in my neck of the woods, when it comes to mental health and addiction, not always been the first tack of the experts in the field. And that's a policy failure and an institutional failure of the academics. And so the nature of addiction is that it is a disease that is recoverable. And that's why the Alberta recovery model is the heart of what we're talking about. And so as we see the factors in society of individual autonomy continuing as we move forward in the 21st century, as we saw tragedies like COVID isolate people even further, it's become abundantly clear that unless you bring some sort of antidote to that, purpose in life, a sense of community, relationship built again, you will continue to see addiction crises getting worse, especially when really addictive substances are handed out by the government en masse. And you can look at examples in British Columbia where you saw a 14-year-old underage girl die because she got addicted to unsafe supply. You can see that the BC Health Authority for a 12-year-old who recently passed away in British Columbia was given drug paraphernalia so that she could continue to use. That was the state response to the addiction of minors. And Alberta has said instead the state response is addiction is rampant, it's widespread, and it's going to continue to be unless we give people an off-ramp out of addiction. And so whether we're talking about individuals who have zero recovery capital, people who are living intermittently homeless, maybe they're from a neck of the woods up northwestern Alberta, they might have an Indigenous background, and they are maybe suffering from mental health crisis, maybe a psychosis brought on by the drug use or pre-exists it, maybe they're disposed to an addiction already. Those individuals have next to no recovery capital. They're not holding down a job. They don't have family. They've lost almost all connection to everyone else. Right. There needs to be an intervention in those individuals' lives. And interventions come in all shapes and sizes. Whether you're talking about a run-in with the justice system, or you talk about a healthcare crisis they run into.
Right. There's going to be an intervention of one form or another.
And families. I mean, if you look at, for example, the most successive addiction treatment programs, the literature shows it's industries like the airline industry that say if you are caught trying to fly a plane high or drunk or using of some sort of mind-altering substance, then the risk of your license being revoked is incredibly high. You have a mandatory treatment you must do afterwards at risk of being rejected from that employer and from the industry. And so an intervention can come in that form for some people with more recovery capital, people who still have some capacity. The state needs to be there to support with the broader society individuals that don't have that ability, that institution, maybe that workplace environment to get them into the opportunity to recover as well. So you don't hold any kind of hope or snowball chance in hell of trying to help people through their crisis if you don't address that fundamental heart of a problem, which is some sort of trauma, some sort of issue driving them to addiction. And so most of the addiction treatment we do after medical detox, it's one disease of addiction, right? And it doesn't matter whether it's a process addiction, like, iGaming, for example, or it's an opioid addiction. When you get through that medical detoxification, so much of it's social psychotherapy.
And how is that undertaken? How is the medical detoxification undertaken? So if you're taking people off the street, for example, if they're homeless, what's the first and addicted? What's the first step in the process?
The first step is building a network of detox centers and stabilization across the province. So since we came into power in 2019, we've increased approximately 50% of our treatment capacity. That's about 10,000 spaces per annum that we have in Alberta.
Per annum.
Per annum.
And this is distributed in the major urban centers?
It would be across the entire province. And the majority of those are detox spaces because they're short episodes of stay.
Yep.
Detox is just the first step to moving towards that.
So how long does that typically last?
It could be a week, perhaps less, sometimes 2 weeks. When you're talking
that's medically supervised?
Medically supervised. In Alberta, we have a license regime for this. And so if it's talking about alcohol or benzos, that is a much, much more precarious situation. There could be all sorts of really negative health outcomes if it's not done with appropriate medical supervision. But that could last, say, a couple of days to 2 weeks. Once that happens, we're building a network. We have now funded mass amounts of not-for-profits, community-based treatment centers of all different varieties. Many of them are Indigenous, some are faith-based, some are not. We have no particular predilection towards what that looks like beyond being about recovery and about trying to get people into health. So you're experimenting with
a variety of different approaches?
We're allowing lots of different providers to come into the space.
Yeah. And how do you evaluate the consequences?
So we have My Recovery Plan, which is a metric we're using to talk about someone's recovery capital. So we're seeing a lot of it is subjective analysis of where are you at now, where do you want to be. We have hard metrics as well that go into that analysis. And the idea is that as we build out this recovery continuum, all along the way, right from the very first time you get into detox all the way to a year later, when you look at the end of treatment and you're in post-recovery housing, integrated into the community, are you seeing recovery capital continue? Because right now, tragically, the only metric really used across Canada, I'd say probably across all of North America, is overdose deaths.